Hello YouTube. In this video, I participated in my first ever game jam. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, a game jam is a lot like a writing sample, where you have a specific amount of time to create a game that goes along with a theme. The time frame for the game jam I entered is 72 hours, and it started with the announcement of the theme, Unstable. After the theme was announced, I wrote down tons of different concepts and ideas of potential games that I could make. Consequently, some were good, some were not so good, but the good thing was I only had to pick one. I ended up picking a slightly modified version of this one. The slight modification was, instead of emitting chemicals, you play as the brain and you collect emotions to remain stable. After choosing the idea, I made an organized list of everything I needed to do in the game. Once all the planning was complete, I opened up Unity and began programming the game. Or at least I was going to, until I realized that I picked a 3D template for making a 2D game. So I created a new project, but this time with the 2D template. And now I'm ready to start programming. The very first thing I need is a player that moves around. Perfect. Now I need 4 different bars at the top of the screen that represent different emotions the player will have. Once that was finished, I needed a way to increase and decrease said emotion bars. So I created emotion bubbles that, upon collection, will increase or decrease the respected emotion. So the game would be very easy and probably very boring if the emotions just stayed in place the whole time. So I added some movement patterns to get them moving around. When that was completed, I made a spawner script that randomly spawns emotion bubbles around the player. With the completion of the spawner script, I feel like I have everything the game needs to have with the exception of artwork, and day 1 was just about over. So day 2 began with me doing art, and a lot of art. I started off making a bunch of sprites for the bubbles. When that was done, I went on to making the player. When I was finished with the player, I went back into Unity and made some basic animations on the bubbles. To make the game a little more interesting, I then added holes and walls into the environment, so the player now has another goal, avoiding the holes. I then programmed the player's ability to teleport through the bounds of the screen. Now for the rest of day 2, I worked on making music, which was kind of a problem because I had no idea how to make music. The extent of my musical knowledge comes from playing this thing in elementary school. Okay, how does this thing work? Okay, cool. Okay, slightly less cool. I have an idea. Okay, pretty good. I think we can do better though. Ah, perfect. So I started making the song by basically placing random notes down and seeing what sounded good. And when I found something I didn't hate, I just went with it. I then got the song imported into Unity and had way too much fun messing around with the pitch slider. This concluded day 2. Day 3 began with sound effects, which was very similar to music and how I had no idea how to make it. I started off making the player movement sound effect by putting my microphone in my mouth and making strange noises. I then put some effects on them and played them all at the same time. Then I made the bubble moving sound in a very similar way. However, those two took a long time to make, and because in a game jam you don't have a lot of time, I had to make sound effects using a more faster and efficient way. So I downloaded S.H.A.F, which is a free 8-bit sound generator, and I used that to make the remainder of the sounds. Because of it, they don't all fit together, but I think it's worth it considering the time. I then whipped up a quick background and game over screen so the player can actually lose the game. And upon losing the game, the player is met with the game over screen and a very positive message. Now, because this message is just too positive and too professional, I think it would be unfair to leave it in the game for all the other members of the game jam. so I created some UI sprites to use instead. While I was at it, I also made the main menu screen. And when I was making the sprites for the main menu, I realized something very important. I don't have a title for the game, so I came up with the beautiful title, S.H.A.F. S.H.A.F is an acronym for all the emotions the player has: sad, happy, angry, and fear. Now I was considering adding a tutorial to the game, but I instead made it so the holes and walls were randomly distributed at the beginning of the game. Now I started work on the tutorial, or at least I thought I was, but I actually created a time system where it displays your time on the game over screen when you die. Right when I finished making the timer, day 3 ended, and the final day began. Day 4 began with me waking up bright and early to continue working on the game. Instead of adding a tutorial, which I probably should have done, I thought it would be interesting to add some power-ups for the player. For the power-ups, I made 2 of them, a mini and a speedy. The mini power-up makes the player small, so it's easier to dodge all the unwanted emotional bubbles, and the speedy speeds the player up so he can get away from the bubbles easier. These power-ups, though, are temporary, and the player loses their effects after 10 seconds. Now the unfortunate part of day 4 began, with me having to go to school for 6 hours and arriving home with only 4 hours to finish the game. You'd think now I definitely would add the tutorial, but instead I made the power-ups randomly spawn throughout the map and made some quick balance changes to make the game more fun. Now I was going to add a tutorial, but then I actually did add the tutorial. I wanted to make a more interactive tutorial than what I did, but unfortunately I just didn't have the time. So the tutorial pretty much plays like a slideshow where you just click next and read some information about the game. Once the tutorial was done, I did a quick test of the game to make sure everything was working, then I built it and submitted it. Because I've never done something like this, the submission process was very stressful, with me having no idea what I was doing. But I got it done during the submission hour, about 20 minutes before the deadline was over. If you wanted to play S.H.A.F, you can, by clicking the link in the description, which will take you to the submission page. When you're there, you can click on the download link, which will send you to itch.io. When you're there, you can click the actual download link, which will download a zip file. Extract the zip file, and then double-click the exe. When you try to run it, if you have Windows Defender, it might say that my game is a little sus, because I'm an unknown publisher. To get around this, you click More Info, and then Run Anyways. And then you get to play the game. Now, the game isn't necessarily a masterpiece, but I'm proud of what I did with the time I had. And it's a fun thing to mess around with for 5-10 minutes if you're bored. If you're curious on how much code I had to write, here it is. All things considered, I had a really fun time making this game. Sure, it's not the most amazing thing in the world, but it's mine, and I'm proud of it. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, if you want to play the game, you can just click the link in the description, and if you do, please rate it, it would mean a lot to me. If you want to do something else that would mean a lot to me, consider clicking that subscribe button. It's free, it's fast, and I'd really appreciate it. So, thanks for watching. Bye.